أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا وشفينا أبي القاسم محمد أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى وتبارك في كتاب المبين وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We are here to do a program as a series for the 10 days of Muharram, and to do so we thought that we will leave the comfort of the studio and come to a place in the city of Birmingham, a place known as the Mehdi Institute. The Mehdi Institute, the founder and the source and inspiration behind this institute is no other than Sheikh Arif Abdul Hussain, who has embarked upon a great task of bringing the knowledge from the houses of Qum and Najaf to this place in England, to let the new generations of Shi'a al-Ibad who grow and acquire knowledge of Islam will not have to travel all the way to those great places, initially at least, and later on, once their knowledge is gained, they can of course take the trips to those great holy places. And brothers and sisters, this program that we are doing for the Ashura Muharram is at a place, this institute used to belong as a teaching institution of the church, where students were brought in to learn the Christian philosophy, theology, their books of great knowledge. And the place we are sitting doing the recording was part of their chapel, their prayer of worship. Today we are sitting here to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Husayn in Islam, the Shuhada Karbala. It shows how the clock turns, as our clock turns to 12, and again it starts to rotate and come back again to the same position. It is the church, it was a chapel where from the journey of Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham, the severed head of Syed al-Shuhada, Hazrat Imam Husayn al-Islam, was kept in a chapel at a rahib, at a monastery's place, and the great rahib honored the great head of our Syed al-Shuhada and talked to him and accepted Islam as a religion and a faith for him to follow. And this chapel again is one place where we are trying to talk about the martyrdom of Islam. Remember our great prophet, Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all the Aima from 1 to 12 strived to do one thing: talk about peace, talk about love, talk about harmony and unity in the society at large, irrespective of faith, religion, culture or creed. And today, alhamdulillah, from this institution, which was a chapel before, now a place of worship, as a mosque, as a prayer room, as a place for majlis, we are trying to extend our hands and our hearts, as our great Prophet and the Aimah did, to our Christian brothers and sisters, and even to other people of faith, to say, let us hold hand together. If we are not brothers in faith and religion, then we are brothers in humanity, and that is the position Islam has always taken, and that is the position for which Hazrat Imam Husayn al-Islam embarked from Karbala, from Madina, to his journey towards Karbala. And to talk about that, we would like to wish Sheikh Arif that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him all the strength and his blessings, that this institution, this Mehdi Institute, flourishes in a way that great scholars come out of here to spread the gospel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the gospel of love, the gospel of peace, the gospel of justice. Alhamdulillah. Now, to talk about all this, as I recited the ayat from Quran, Surah Baqarah, ayat 279, where I read two simple words, La tazlamuna wa la tuzlamun. Do not become cruel or side with the cruel. Do not be a zalim and side with side with the Muslim, the one who is being the sufferers. To take this topic and broaden it out and look at the martyrdom of our great Imam, Syed al-Shuhada, Hazrat Imam Husayn, in the battle of Karbala. I have with me an opportunity to introduce to you a great scholar, a great mind, a great writer, and a wonderful speaker, a wonderful presenter of truth and knowledge, in a gentleman that we know so well over the television here, is Chris Hewitt. Chris, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. It is my great honor and pleasure, and I'm so grateful to you as well, of you bringing a depth of knowledge with you here that we can share with the people, the audience, which is actually right across the world on this Hidayat TV. And I thank Hidayat TV that it has given us, the two of us, a great opportunity to convey this message of remembrance of the martyrdom of Karbala, and also the land, or the promised land of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Jannah who He has promised to those who follow taqwa, humility, piety, and follow the path of love and peace. Chris, to begin with, I hope the young audience that is watching us, they will say, the episode that you are talking about today is, Chris, is more than 1400 years old. Things are past. Forget about the past. Let us think about the life of our presence, the present day, and let us talk about the future. Why ponder upon the past? Why dwell upon a tragedy that took place of 1400 years? A wonderful role Imam Husayn alayhi salam place. No, let us look at the lives of the present people and leadership who have made great sacrifices also. Is it the duty of the historians only to remember, or is it each of our duties to remember and pay them the respect that deserve in our memory, in our action, for what they did, not only 1400 years ago, but from the time of Hazrat Adam as we call them in English, right down to the present day.
I think first of all we need to think about this term remembrance. You see, we use remember in different ways. There's the simple reminder, make sure that you pick up some milk on the way home.
Yes.
The consequence of not remembering is not so serious. There's another level of remembrance in which we are trying to remember a piece of poetry or the structure of a language or a mathematical formula, and this is a fact that we try to get into our heads. But there's another much deeper level of remembrance, because this remembrance is an action not only of our mind, but also of our bodies, of our emotions, and also of our spirit.
MashaAllah.
This is the remembrance that we speak of when we talk about commemorating an event of a great spiritual significance in the history of humankind. So in all our religious traditions, there are things that we should remember in this way. Now, let's push it a little further. You see, we think from our human perspective that the events of Karbala are 1400 years ago. If we look at it from God's perspective, God is outside time.
MashaAllah.
God is not limited by time in this way. So the events of Karbala are present at this very moment in God's sight.
MashaAllah.
So we are remembering a present act. Then we can go one stage further, because we are spiritual beings. God has breathed the divine spirit into us. This enables us to have a relationship with God. This means that when we enter into a spiritual act of remembrance, we are actually entering into God's time and not our time.
MashaAllah.
And so we enter into the present as well. So
Super.
we are reliving that moment. This is what we mean when we say that every day in our current lives, every day should be Ashura. Every place should be Karbala. And we remember that by re-entering into it, by reliving it, day by day, hour by hour, during these days of Muharram. So it is not just a mental act that we think about it, what would the sequence, oh yes. It is also a physical act. We make procession, we attend majlis, and so on. It is not only an emotional act, because we feel within our own bodies the pain and suffering of those who were on the field of Karbala, but it is essentially a spiritual act, that in the depths of our spiritual being we enter into once again that supra-historical moment. We say technically meta-historical. It is above the mere history, so that it enters into the eternal present of God. That's why we need to remember, so that we are lifted in our spirits into this communion with God.
MashaAllah. Very well explained by Chris. As I would like to tell you, Chris is a great scholar of not only Islam, but many other religions. And he has done comparative studies of religion, and the depth of knowledge of Islam in Chris is phenomenal. And Although coming from Catholic tradition, knowing very well the sacrifices the prophets made in time, from Adam to Nuh to Ibrahim, and even our great prophet Hazrat Isa salam. The reason that Chris spoke about, we remember the martyrdom of Karbala, not just as Chris pointed out, as a historical event, but as a meta-historical event, spiritual event, physical and spiritual, both encompassed into one. And therefore, if we do that, we are in debt of those great historical, spiritual characters who paid a great price for the fundamentals of what they believed in with their lives and the sacrifices they made and the families made of the great prophet. Chris, there is one question. If we look at the life of our great prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Maulaya Kanat Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam, his great daughter Shahzadi Kaunain Fatima Zahra Islamullah, and those grandchildren whom he loved so dearly, Imam Hassan Mustafa al-Islam and Imam Hussain al-Islam. Each of them made their sacrifices. Each of them gave all they had within them in the pursuit of the path and the gospel given by Allah for them to propagate amongst mankind. Each of them sacrificed, but each of them, their sacrifices, their hard work, their spirituality, they were different in ways, but the aim and objective was the same. If we look at, before we go on to Imam Husayn al-Islam, his great brother, Imam Hassan Mustafa al-Islam, is declared the man who made peace with the tyrant, the ruler, the power-hungry person in Muawiyah, and his younger brother, Imam Husayn al-Islam, the son of Muawiyah, Yazid, right? Imam Husayn al-Islam faced him, his army, on the field of Karbala. Two brothers, same aim and objectives, same spiritual path and pursuit, yet one does it with a piece of paper, signing a treaty and honoring a peace agreement, right? And Imam Husayn al-Islam taking the cup of martyrdom and drinking the cup of martyrdom and saying to the world, right, our aim are the same, but our approach are the different. Why did the two brothers take two different approaches?
I think first of all we need to remember the verse of the Quran that speaks of the Prophet. When it says of the Prophet, he does not speak out of his own will,
MashaAllah,
but he speaks only by the will of God. Therefore, we must ask always not why did they do this, but why did God command them to act in this way?
MashaAllah.
Because one does not make a sacrifice, one is obedient to God. What God has called from you, it's not for me to do the same. I must obey what God has called from me. So in the same way, we see that the two brothers here are totally obedient to what God has asked from them. They speak not in their own right, they speak by the power of God who is speaking in them. Secondly, we can see here a very important lesson for today, and that is human life is precious. Human life should not be wasted. Now, Imam Husayn knows very well, because of the forces amassed against him, that if he is going to take a stand militarily against the forces of Muawiyah, there is going to be bloodshed. The Muslim Ummah is going to be divided. There's going to be chaos amongst Muslims. And so therefore God does not will that this division should take place, that this wholesale massacre should take place. And so Imam Hussain follows the course of peace. That is the way he is called by God. Do not accept the unrighteous claim of Muawiyah. You are still God's chosen, you are still the Imam of this time. However, make peace with him so that human life will be spared. This is how I understand the way that Imam Hussain deals with Muawiyah. And indeed we can go on to say that after his death, his younger brother Imam Husayn follows this procedure. He also wants to avoid the unnecessary loss of human life. Human life is precious. It is not cheap. And in our own time, when we think of the industrialization of warfare in our own age, then we see that human life has been cheapened. And this is profoundly against the teaching of God throughout the centuries.
Sami, the explanation given very eloquently by our brother Chris over here is the role of our great Imam, our second Imam, Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba. Just to remind you, the aim and objective can sometimes be achieved by war, but from the time of Hazrat Adam al-Islam, each Nabi, each Prophet, each Imam also did the same thing. If we can achieve the same thing, as Chris pointed out, by not having bloodshed, by avoiding massacres and killings, and if the same objective can be achieved by peace, then it is peace they will always take, and they are always taken. Remember, Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam achieved everything he wanted through that peace treaty, what he could have achieved by going into a battle against Muawiyah. He agreed with Muawiyah, and Muawiyah put his signature to the document that after Muawiyah's lifetime, the administration, the power will revert back to Hazrat Imam Husayn Islam, and the Khilafat Imam will be with Imam Husayn Islam, the rightful owner as the custodian of faith from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He achieved that through treaty, so why go to war? He asked Muawiyah that whatever the coffers, whatever comes into from taxes into the coffers at Kufa, all will be handed over to him so that he can look after the poor and the needy and look after the service of the people of those times. He also made sure that he asked Muawiyah, stop the abuses, right? Imam Hussain Islam, against his father, Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib Islam, which was taking place from mosques and pulpits in the regime, the time of Muawiyah. He achieved all those. And that is the greatest teaching in this modern day and age. If, as we speak today, the world is at war in one sector of the world, in one sphere of the world and the other, if we followed the teaching of Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba Islam, give peace a chance. Give peace utmost chance to achieve the solutions and not create battles and wars, because it always leads to loss of life, to loss of property, to loss of peace and harmony in a community. And as Chris said, Imam Husayn al-Islam went out with the same purpose. But let me put this to Chris. Why is it that Imam Husayn al-Islam signed the peace treaty with what you call Muawiyah, right? And how is it possible that at that time of life, when the tribes were fighting against each other, when the loyalties and was going towards Muawiyah because he had the power and the throne, why is it that still right to the end, even after being poisoned, the last words of our great Imam Hassan Mujtaba Islami was to us as a lesson: pursuit of peace, for justice and equality and the rights of the people is the best solution for you, and take up arms only when you have gone through every other opportunity that was available. So the question, very briefly, is Imam Hussain Mujtaba Islam agreed with Muawiyah, signed a deal. Muawiyah negated on his sign, and not only negated, he went everything that he has signed in the treaty, he undid all of them, right? Then the time of our great Imam Husayn al-Islam came onto this, on the pages, on the screen of history. And you will recall he had to leave his watan, his home in Madina, quite so reluctantly, where the grave of the great Prophet was, where the grave of his mother, Fatima Zahra, and embark on a journey which led to such a catastrophe, such a disaster, such a massacre, such a great sacrifice. And Imam Husayn did that with what purpose and with what aim?
If we go back first of all to the question about Imam Hassan, remember the event in the life of the Prophet, because the Imams are always following and representing events from the life of the Prophet. And we know that the Prophet himself was rejected and driven out from Taif. And you remember that he has to flee and things are thrown at him and so on. And then we have recorded a prayer of his. And the key line from that prayer is to say, "Oh Allah, if it's okay between you and me, I don't care what has happened. I don't care for the rejection of the people." Now, if we take that motif forward to Imam Hassan, what it is saying is, if you know that you are the chosen of God, you have nothing to prove. You don't have to stand on your dignity. You don't have to be belligerent, because it's okay between you and God. And I think that this is Imam Hassan saying, God is at work, I am God's obedient servant, I do not need to stoop down to lowly means. Now, if we then move it forward again, as you say, to Imam Husayn, Hussain follows the pledge, the treaty of his brother with Muawiyah.
He still honors it.
He still honors it,
yes,
until it is broken. Not by him, but it is broken by Muawiyah. And Muawiyah appoints Yazid, his son, as his successor. This breaks the treaty. Now that changes the whole dynamic. And from that time onwards, we need to be asking the way that Imam Husayn in obedience to God's direction, pursues the cause of justice. Yes, he leaves Medina, the city of the Prophet, the graves of the holy ones of his own family. Now, I do not want to desecrate. I do not want there to be bloodshed in Medina. Surely, these people are Muslims. Surely they will respect the city of Mecca. They will respect the holy place. And so he goes with his followers and with his family from Medina to Mecca. Surely they will respect me here. But then, indeed, he has to flee from Mecca. Not just to flee on any day, but to flee during the Hajj itself. Not even to wait until the ceremonies of Hajj, of Arafat are past. No, he leaves before, immediately. Why? I do not want the holy city to be desecrated by bloodshed. These people are coming, it should not come to an encounter here. So from Medina to Mecca, from Mecca into the desert, in the direction of Iraq, Imam Husayn is always seeking to be obedient, not to give in to injustice, but to avoid bloodshed as well.
So beautifully narrated the chapter and verse of history of why the great Imam Syed al-Shuhada Abu Abdullah Imam Husayn al-Islam had to leave his home, Madina. And as pointed out, Imam Husayn al-Islam, as Chris said, did pursue the passage of peace. It was only when Walid called upon Imam Husayn al-Islam with the message from Yazid to do bayt, in other words in English, to sign an allegiance to Yazid, and Imam Husayn al-Islam refused to do so because Khilafat, Imamat in Islam, as per se of Allah's great holy book, the Quran, is to be in Ma'sumin, the infallible. And that's why Imam Husayn al-Islam, when he went to the palace, right, he had Hazrat Abbas and others with him. He could have dealt with him with an opportunity with his weapons, with his swords, but he loved peace, he worked for peace. It was so sad for Imam Husayn al-Islam to go to the grave, to the tomb, to the Rawza of his grandfather and say to him, Assalamu alaikum ya Abab, great O Nana, O my grandfather, my salam to you. Hussain has come to say his salam for the last time because, O my grandfather, O Nana, Hussain will never come back again. Then he goes to the grave of his mother, Fatima Zahra Salamullah, and says, Mother, you brought me up with so much pain, with grinding of the corn and everything that you did for me. Mother, I will not be able to come to your grave anymore. I must leave Madina. I've got a duty to fulfill, which I promised my grandfather, and I must leave Madina. We, sometimes when we have to leave our home, our hearts wells up with tears, and with that he left Madina. Let me ask Chris, he did not leave Madina alone, which he could have, but he left Madina with the nearest and the closest of his family, knowing very well what the tragedy is going to be. But in his eyes, in his mind, there was a price to be paid. And Hussain, as a great Imam, as a great custodian of the faith of Islam, was prepared to make that sacrifice, was prepared to go to the every possible means to say also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have done my duty the way you wished. And I'm going to put this question to Chris. Chris, why didn't Imam Husayn Islam leave Medina all by himself, leave the family behind, and take all the pains that is and the tragedy that is going to befall upon his shoulders alone, single-handed? After all, Imam was capable of doing it. Yet he chose women, children, even an infant to go with him. That's the question I must put to Chris to see. Let me know what his views are.
You see, if you are responsible for a family, that responsibility knows no boundaries, it knows no end. Imagine the situation. If Imam Husayn had left his family in Medina, when the agents of Yazid came and they saw that he had gone, what repercussions might there have been for his family? What retribution might they have taken upon his family? Again, we know that in Mecca, he is asked, it is suggested to him, flee to the Yemen, leave your family here, they will be safe. But again, he refuses, I will not go, because if I go, there is nobody to protect my family. So it is the responsibility of the head of a family, the father of his children, the husband of his wife, to protect them and to see until the very last, to the extent of his power, that they are safe. Secondly, I think it's very important that Imam Husayn goes toward Karbala not in a euphoric cloud, but with his eyes wide open, because he knows that from the moment that Yazid calls for the Pledge of Allegiance, that we have now reached the breaking point. Because if the Imam of the community pledges his allegiance to a tyrant and a despot, other people will follow his example. So it was absolutely clear in his mind, I cannot do this, whatever the consequences. And with somebody like Yazid and his agents, the consequences are not going to be good, either for him or for his family. So we see that from that moment onwards, he goes on in complete trust in God. God has brought me to this situation. God will not desert me. God will remember me. God will vindicate me.
Samain, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy we cannot afford to forget. It's a tragedy which we must keep into our hearts and minds every day. As our brother here, Chris, said, every place is Karbala and every day is Ashura. Let me tell you for once that when the opportunity came and the time came to leave Medina, our great Imam went to the great Prophet's great wife, Salama, and he went there and gave his salam there. And Salama, Janab Salama, knew why Hussain was there to see her. And Salama gave, he says, O Hussain, do not go. Do not go, for we know the tragedy that is going to fall. And our great Imam said to Salama, I have a great promise to fulfill. I must go. And Imam Husayn al-Islam left Medina in a magnificent way that the Imam does. He asked his brother Abbas, Imam's great brother Abul Fazl Abbas, that prepare for the departure of the people. And Imam Husayn al-Islam very carefully made the list of the ones who would accompany him. Each and every one of them who accompanied Imam on his great journey were the ones who gave such an example of honor, of loyalty and sacrifice that today their character, their sacrifice, everything there is without a blemish, without a crime. And Abbas came, got the caravan ready, then came the time for the people to embark upon those and upon the journey. And remember, he took his sisters, Zainab and Kulsum, with him. But in what way? Every non-mahram, those who were out of the family, they were removed from the sight, that no sight, nobody's eyes should even go towards them. And were under the cover, protection of Abul Fazl Abbas. They went onto the backs of the camel. Once done, then at the end, Hazrat Imam Husayn al-Islam and Abbas al-Islam today covered and made sure that the great lady, the light of Islam amongst the women in the field of Karbala, Zainab Saniya Zahra, was to climb on to the camel. But one person was to be left behind. His beautiful, his loving, caring daughter, Sohra, remained behind with some purpose. And thus the journey went. But remember that journey, when after the field and battle of Karbala, Zainab remembered how in a great way they departed from Madina. But when Zainab was to leave Karbala, her hands were tied behind her neck. Syed Sajjad, the son of Imam Husayn al-Islam, Zainul Abidin, had hands tied, feet shackled, and the army of Yazid had their weapons ready with the slaps on the face of Sakina, Ruqayya. They left Karbala with the martyrs of Karbala lying on the field of Karbala with their heads separated and body there. What a journey to begin with in Medina, and what a journey to bring and start from Karbala to Kufa to Qam. And that is why when Zainul Abidin al-Islam, our great Imam, was asked, what do you remember most from the episode of Karbala? Where did you suffer most? He said, Asham, 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 the humiliation through which the household of Prophet were put through. In the palace of Yazid was so horrible that the Imam always remembered it, that was the great day of sacrifice on the 10th of Muharram in Ashura, and on the day they were presented into the audience of Yazid in Sham. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the tawfiq, the ability to remember the great sacrifice of our great Imam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the quwwat, the energy, the strength to pursue the path of peace, to pursue the path of siding with those who are being tortured, on whom cruelty is having its effect, and to stand up against the ones who are cruel brutal dictators of their time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you and all of His blessings upon you and upon your household, upon your children, and all the ummah of our Prophet in this world. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the mercy and the sacrifice of Muhammad and Islam, the pursuit of peace, irrespective of religion, caste or creed or color, may prevail on this earth. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.